How's it going, everyone? Taki here. Today we're going to be taking a look at the new Ayaneo Geek 1S, and if you read the title, then you already know that I'm going to be giving this away in this video. I recently did a video on the Ayaneo 2S that launched with this model, and some people have been wondering if I still recommend going for the cheaper Geek version, as I did with the original models from last year. In the hyper-competitive market that we find ourselves in, I will almost always go for the best device from a price versus performance standpoint, and I don't expect that the Geek 1S will lose in that regard. This should be the overall best version of this product refresh, but we will see if that holds up after we test it. At this point, I already own an Ayaneo 2, a 2S, and a Geek, so I have no need for a Geek 1S, which is why this is going to be given away. As long as I can get a company to handle the hassle of shipping these out to winners, I'm going to be doing a lot of stuff like this going forward because I have no interest in hoarding multiple versions of the same product, and I'm also not interested in reselling reviewer units. I agreed to handle shipping out this to whoever wins this giveaway, and it should be open worldwide as long as there is a shipping route to where you live. I'll have more details on this later on in the video. Let's get started with the specs of the Ayaneo Geek 1S that I have. This guy comes with a Ryzen 7 7840U that doesn't need any introduction at this point. The important thing to point out, however, is that this has a 33-watt TDP cap with the built-in software. Our GPU is a Radeon 780M with a max clock of 2.7 GHz, and we have 32 GB of LPDDR5X RAM running at 6400, but 7500 is possible with a BIOS change. This also has 512 GB of storage, a 7-inch 800p display, and a 50.25 watt-hour battery. When it comes to pricing, there are a ton of SKUs for this version of the device, with pricing ranging from $699 up to $959. These are campaign prices, and they are still active at this moment. The configuration that I have is currently selling for $799 with retail pricing of $1,099. Even if we ignore the retail price, this will be the biggest value item that I've ever given away on the channel, and that does come with some important implications depending on where you live. When it comes to the Geek 1S and the Ayaneo 2S, the only real difference is the removal of the whole entire front sheet of glass that only serves the purpose of hiding the bezels of the screen. There's also a drop in resolution going from 1200p down to 800p with the SKU that I have, but it is important to note that Aya does sell a Geek 1S with the Ayaneo 2S screen, further complicating things. I personally believe that this design is the better of the two options, but I really like the white Ayaneo 2S. The black version isn't as good when it comes to things like fingerprints and stuff like that, so it's a lot harder to recommend the Geek last time around, but they have a white version of the Geek 1S that looks really good. Obviously, I don't have that version here, but I did get a chance to use it for a bit in Aya's filming studio. This is unrelated, but I have to say that it's super weird to film in somebody else's studio, but I didn't want to carry all of these devices back to my house to be able to film this section of this video, and I wasn't about to pass up the opportunity to film with a $6,000 camera setup. Back to the color options. The Geek 1S takes the cake as the best version of this product range that I've seen in person. The paint quality is excellent, and I think that it will hold up a lot better with heavy use compared to the full glass sheet on the 2S. They also offer a Geek 1S in purple that isn't personally for me. I think the transparent version that never saw the light of day was a lot better than this color option, but if purple is your favorite color, maybe this one looks good to you. Even outside the color, I think the bezels look a lot worse than they do on the white or the black version because they stand out with this case color. It would be great if we got to the point where we don't have to deal with bezels of any kind on handhelds like these, but we're not there yet. That's pretty much all there is when it comes to the Geek 1S option. They have a lot more options for the 2S, and some of them are kind of wild. Too flashy for me, but I thought I'd just throw this in here since I already had the footage from filming the white Geek 1S. Back to the 2S and the 1S, the only difficult thing about picking the Geek over the regular version now that we have a new white SKU is that we have a worse screen, at least with the option that I have. The original one came with an 800p display, but they allowed some people to upgrade to a 1200p display after they canceled some other SKUs. This time around, they allowed anyone to get a 1200p version of the 1S, but it's a lot more money. The 800p display is not as good as the 1200p display when it comes to color accuracy and contrast ratio, but I don't know if it's worth shelling out for the added money just to get the better screen. I would personally go with the 800p option since it's at a competitive price point, but I really wish that they only offered the 1200p panel at the lower price of the Geek One S. I kind of wish they didn't use the 800p panel at all to differentiate this product line, because the 1200p screen is the only one that they should be using at this point for all of their products. I want to get started with some benchmarks, but before we do that, let's briefly talk about the software. I have covered the iSpace 2 software in my Air 1S video, and I have that installed on this unit. This is the current version of the software. As it stands now, the UI looks a little different than it does in my Air 1S video because they have this new bottom shelf that wasn't there before, but everything else is pretty much the same. They are still pumping out new updates to this to improve things, and I hope it gets further fleshed out as they move forward. Right now, I like it. It's the best total option that we have on a Windows handheld at this point. One of the new changes that we have since the last time I looked at this is the addition of the FPS Thunder overlay. If you go into the monitoring section, I skipped this option before because it conflicts with the overlay that I want to use, but I'll disable it just so we can see how their overlay looks. So here's the FPS Thunder overlay. It has some useful information like CPU frequency, load, and package power, as well as some other system stats. If you do not have anything at all, this one is a decent option to go with. I do have one, so I'm going to disable this and just use the one that I have since I've kind of standardized things across all of the products that I film at this point. I do change things somewhat, but I haven't made any big changes in the last few months. Now we're going to take a look at some benchmarks. When it comes to the Geekbench 5 CPU benchmark, I got a pretty high single core score of 1762 using the 33 watt TDP setting and a multi-core score of 9008. These are both really great scores for a handheld device, especially when it comes to emulation. I also went ahead and did the TimeSpy benchmark, and I got an overall score of 3133 at 33 watt TDP. We have a graphics score of 2822 and a CPU score of 8354. Now it's time to take a brief look at what we can do with that performance. So this is not a new processor at this point, and we've already taken a look at what it can do many times on the channel. The only thing that I'm looking for here is to check if it performs within the range of the other 7840U devices that I have. I'm also checking to see how it handles thermals. Our first game is Final Fantasy VII Remake, and we're testing this at 28 watt TDP, but iSpace will force a 2 watt TDP boost that we do not have the ability to disable yet. It's kind of dumb, but that's how things have been for over a year now. The game runs perfectly at this point, but we could probably go a bit lower if we wanted to save on battery power. Our next game is Horizon Zero Dawn, and this one is also at 28 watt TDP, but the 2 watt TDP boost is already gone. We're doing this at 800p low settings, and at this TDP, we will be well over 60 FPS in the area that we're in, especially when we get into combat. So we could lower this TDP if we wanted, or we could bump up our graphics. This is not using FSR, so we could definitely go a lot lower than 20 watt TDP if we wanted. But this is just to show that the device does handle 28 watt TDP perfectly fine, and that's pretty much as high as you'd need to go unless you're going to be doing some high-end emulation. Another game that I wanted to test is Spider-Man Remastered. We're doing this at 800p lowest settings, and again, we're not using any upscaling at all. Our first section of the game is going to be at night, and we're doing really well over here right now. We don't quite hit 60 at all, so we would need to use FSR if we wanted to make that happen. At this resolution, this is a very demanding game to play, even with the very low preset. And just to check if there's any difference, I did want to go through here in the daytime. The performance seems to be about the same.
He's right. How did I lose track of time?
Our next game is Shadow of the Tomb Raider. This one is a lighter game that doesn't have any issues hitting the FPS cap without FSR enabled. We are at 800p low settings, and I had this set to 28 watt from the previous game, but that was too high. I enabled VSync to see if that would drop things, but the power just reallocates. So for something like this, I'm just going to disable VSync and adjust the TDP until we can start seeing the FPS drop. In the floating menu, we can quickly change the TDP, but it's a bit awkward to use in a game like this because it sends double input to both apps. You'd probably want to use your finger to adjust this, but it's a little difficult for fine-tune adjustments. At 20 watt TDP, we still have great performance. I'm going to leave things here because I know that some areas in this game will be under 60 FPS, even at 20 watt TDP.
¿Cómo te fue hoy?
Underwater? He wants us to search everywhere. Obviously, we've been missing something.
Our last big game for this video is Monster Hunter World at 720p high settings, and again we're at 20 watt TDP from our last game. This one runs just fine. I can remember when this game was too difficult to run at all, so it's kind of crazy how things have progressed in the last couple of years. That's enough for the PC games. Things are basically performing about how I would expect, and the thermal performance is good at around 65 Celsius when you are at 28 watt TDP or lower. This is with the hardware fan curve, so you could make further improvements to this if you wanted with the software control. I would say that the device feels a bit better in the hand than the 2S when it comes to thermals, and I don't know if that's due to not having the glass sheet on the front or not. I tend to use lower TDP on my own devices, which is even better for thermals and battery life. At 15 watt TDP, you're going to be around 2 hours of battery life on this device. Now we're going to move over to emulation, and I only have a couple of games that I want to look at here. Our first game is Infamous for the PlayStation 3, and we're using the RPCS3 emulator for this. This game is performing very well with a 20 watt TDP cap. I thought that we would need to go higher than this, but I guess things have improved enough with this emulator that we don't need to go that high for a game like this. When it comes to God of War 3, we do need a higher TDP, so I bumped it up to 29 watt TDP. At that TDP, the game runs well enough, but I have seen it run better on other devices. This game is kind of all over the place on some platforms. Sometimes you can get it to run at a really high FPS, but other times it will claw by at like 8 or 10 FPS. This is definitely playable. Let's wrap up this video with some of my closing thoughts on the Geek 1S. When it comes to the Geek 1S, I think it's a really good device that I feel is a better option over the 2S for most people. Obviously it's cheaper than the 2S and it doesn't have some of the bells and whistles, but I think it holds up better against cheaper options like the ROG Ally. Now that we have a cheap option in the market that's easy to get, these more expensive handhelds that are way over $800 are going to be a hard sell if they don't offer something unique, and the 2S doesn't offer enough over the Geek 1S in my opinion. The only thing that I wish is that this had the 2S screen at this price point. That would have been a much better deal. As for the giveaway, this is going to be the second one that I've done on a PC handheld. The last time that I did a giveaway, I kind of made it too difficult on my end in an effort to reward people that were subbed to the channel for a long time. It took me like 9 hours to go through all of the entries on the last handheld, so I tried to find a better way to handle things this time around to hopefully make this more reasonable on my end. We had around 2,500 entries that followed the directions last time, and I imagine that we'll have more this time since this handheld is more expensive. This time around, I will not give additional entries for the years that you've been a sub, but I will give a second entry for all channel members. This giveaway is going to run until February the 28th, and I will update the pinned comment after I've fully verified the winner over email. On screen now, you can find a link to the Google form that will be used for this giveaway. It has all of the remaining important details that you need inside the form itself. Good luck to everyone that enters the giveaway. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see another, take a look at the video that I did on the Ayaneo 2S. Happy gaming everyone, Taki out.